Good afternoon, and welcome to the June 17th Legislative Affairs Subcommittee report. Would all members rise and salute the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk.
Roll call of the members of the subcommittee. Councilor Novoselsky is absent. Councilor Powers is absent. Councilor Rizzo. Here. Councilor Zambudo is absent. Councilor Guanasso. Here. And Chairman Keefe.
Here.
Here. Quorum is present.
Thank you. So taking up the first item today, we have an ordinance further amending the senior work-off abatement program relative to eligibility. Would any members wish to speak on this? If I may, from the chair. Oh, Councilor Rizzo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It doesn't appear that...
Pardon me, I wanted to also give you, I don't know if you received this from Dana Bragenfort, just some of his understandings of how this will help. If you had a chance to read this, I apologize.
Well, that's what I was doing when you called on me. I was just kind of looking at it and looking at it from a historical perspective, and I think it makes sense, you know, to disqualify people based on limits that were going back to the year 2000 just doesn't seem fair. So I'm in agreement with this. It seems like a simple and reasonable modification, so I'll support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Rizzo. And as mentioned, the Dana Bragenfort, Chairman of Revere Board of Assessors, had submitted a letter that will be entered into the record, basically talking about how the established standards have raised from an average income of $45,000 for single applicants and $55,000 for married, and it has now since increased to $73,250 for single and $89,500 for married. And obviously the reason for this was over the last few years, because of the increase in wages and some people's pensions, they were ineligible because their income had raised above the limit, and they were finding it difficult to get 50 good applicants for both the water and sewer reduction and also the real estate abatement. So this is going to make a lot more sense for the residents of Revere now, and hopefully they'll be able to fully fill those 50 spots on each side. So I think everyone would be in favor if we could take the roll.
So this is on the senior work-off property tax abatement program relative to eligibility. Councilor Novoselsky is absent. Councilor Powers is absent. Councilor Rizzo? Yes. Councilor Zambudo?
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Guanasso? Yes. And Chairman Keefe?
Yes.
Yes, this ordinance will be forwarded to the full City Council with a favorable recommendation.
Thank you. And the next item up for bid is ordinance relative to trash collection. Any members wishing to speak on the new trash ordinance? Mr. Mara, would you like to speak on the trash ordinance?
I'll speak to whatever extent anyone has any questions. I think the ordinance is fairly self-explanatory. A lot of it mirrors the existing ordinance, but it is updated to define a lot of the terms that are used in the ordinance. It seems that over the past number of years, a lot of new methods, a lot of new mechanisms are being used in our trash collection process. And really the primary motivation to revise the ordinance was to accommodate was to bring our ordinance in sync with the distribution of the blue trash carts. As many of you know, the trash carts were issued last October, and eventually and ultimately it's the city's objective that only city-issued trash carts be used for trash collection. No more plastic bags on the ground. No various assortment of different types of trash receptacles. So the issuance of the trash carts was step one to that. It has not been enforced simply because there was no ordinance to enforce it under. So now the new ordinance takes into account the blue trash carts, the recyclable carts, and all of the processes that between Department of Public Works and Department of Health we all came together. We must have had at least a dozen different meetings on it to try and make sure that we could have as comprehensive but as fair an ordinance as we can. After its adoption by the City Council, there will be a phase-in period where people will be warned if they're not using only their blue trash carts, but eventually that will become that will be subject to enforcement by the Department of Inspectional Services, and it will all fall under the 40U program in terms of issuing violations and the right to appeal violations.
Thank you, Councilor. Thank you, Mr. Mara. We have Councilor Zambudo and then Councilor Rizzo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, I'm going to ultimately support the new ordinance. What I really need to know is how much education are we going to put out there? Now, I know, these, as far as I'm concerned, these trash containers are terrific, and if used properly, they're going to solve a lot of problems, especially the rodent problem. But I've already seen people overflowing them, not closing the lids. That you might as well just let them put trash bags on the street if we're going to do that. So the enforcement has to be strict. But before that, we need education, and a lot of education. And there's a lot of new people in the city of different cultures. And so whatever way we have to reach these people, they have to understand that we've spent a lot of money to try to make this thing work and try to make a good quality of life for everybody in the city. But everybody has to abide by it. But I'm worried that we're not educating the people enough. And I'm hoping that a big part of this next push, along with the ordinance, is going to be education.
Right, Councilor, through the chair, the educational aspect of this has been ongoing since the distribution of the trash carts. When the trash carts were issued, there were flyers that were attached to every single one of those trash carts that had all of the breakdown. We agree that it's not enough, but it's a matter of getting word out there. And now, after the council adopts, presumably adopts this ordinance, there will be further notification throughout the city that the ordinance is now being adopted. When the time comes for strict enforcement, again, there will be notification of that. Whether the Department of Inspectional Services goes through a sort of a warning process where they'll issue warnings, that is still subject to discussion. We're trying as many different ways as possible to get out news to people of just what the rules of trash disposal are in this city. There's the trash app that's available that the people who do have it love it, but it's getting people to know about it. I think something like 600 people have downloaded it, and it's a great thing, but there's like 16,000 people that we want to download it.
Those are the technically savvy people, which are great, but I think we need videos. I think we need videos in all kinds of languages, especially targeting our newest neighbors and whatever way is the best way to educate them. But we need a lot of different ways of education.
Right.
It makes me angry. I'm not angry, but sad to see the lids up and the overflowing trash. And I'm saying, boy, this defeats the whole system here, all this hard work and money. And I know we can get there, but it's going to take a lot of things. And I think video imaging is one of the best ways to reach people because it doesn't require as much language. When you're illustrated the power of example as to what to do, and you keep showing that, I think no matter what language you speak, you're going to see what's expected of you.
I mean, all of the social media aspects are considered video as well. Unfortunately, I think we encounter a reality that no matter how much notice you issue, the challenge is getting people to acknowledge or abide by the notice that you're giving out.
Well, I think once we've educated the people enough, then you got to drop the hammer.
Well, that's where enforcement comes in.
Enforcement has got to be there. Once we feel comfortable that we've done everything we could to educate as many people as we can, then the enforcement has to be absolutely strict. Because if we allow this overflowing trash, we might as well just to burnt that money instead of buying these trash barrels.
One thing that the 40U program made very clear to people is that there's nothing that educates like a violation of some sort. Now, hopefully it doesn't come to that.
But we
that
want to
is-
be fair about it, too. We want to get them to a point where we feel we've really gone above and beyond with the education. Then it's time to crack down. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Rizzo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. At the outset, let me just say, I was one that really didn't like the idea of just broad brushing with all these brand new barrels across the city. I think there were a lot of people, and I'm sure you guys must have heard it, and I heard it from countless people, that they already had barrels. They've got barrels in their backyards now that they were doing the right thing, but yet now they're told that instead of putting out their 2 barrels maybe that they would have had, they get 1 barrel in a single-family home, 2 barrels in a 2-family home. They have the privilege of buying another barrel if they deem that necessary. And I quite honestly equated that not as much as going after the rat problem as implementing kind of a backdoor trash fee. That's the way that a lot of people, I think, that I've talked to view that. They've now had to take their $50 or $75 barrels and put them in the back. But that's neither here nor there. You guys have made the decision to implement this policy. That's, you know, that's out of the city council's hands right now. The question I have is on page 7, and we have this overflow trash that you can drop off at the city yard on the 2nd and 4th Saturday. And it says that the Department of Public Works may establish a reasonable fee for the disposal of overflow trash. So that doesn't clearly lay out what that is. Is that just subject to whoever's working that day, or is there going to be down the road a fee for people to drop off their trash down there?
I think the reason, first of all, to get to your question about the people that do have barrels, and, you know, unfortunately, when you pass an ordinance or when you create an ordinance, there are some people who are abiding by the rules, and they're doing all of the right things. And yet, a new ordinance comes into place, and it implicates the people who are already abiding the rules. And that's just sometimes the natural fallout of any kind of a change in an ordinance. But people who do have those barrels, we are encouraging people, you know, don't get rid of them. Use those for your overflow trash. Use those for your yard clippings, because those barrels can be used for the overflow trash on the so-called trash holidays, the 6 times during the year when when the non-city issued trash barrels would be collected. So we don't want people to throw them away. They're very useful. In terms of your specific question, Councilor, with regard to the possibility of a fee for the Saturday, the semi-monthly Saturday overflow trash disposal, we did not include a fee. There is not any plan to include a fee. The reason that's in there is that if, as time goes by, the Department of Public Works finds that this is becoming burdensome, or that it is something that far exceeds anything that is anticipated in terms of people bringing their trash, the ordinance at least leaves the opening for the Department of Public Works to consider whether or not a fee is necessary. So it's more of a safety hatch than it is a prediction.
Well, I would only say this. If it's not necessary now, then, I mean, ordinances change all the time. Administrations come up, they amend ordinances all the time. Why have it in? I mean, I'd feel more comfortable not to see it there and just tell people that they can go down and dispose of their trash. If you find that it is not working and a fee is required, that just seems very ambiguous to me, that they may establish a fee, and when we don't currently have one. I don't know why we can't strike that language. I mean, you know, like I say, people right now, you know, a lot of people don't like the fact that they've got to, you know, I know, and it's not a bad recommendation, Bob, you know, use it as some overflow trash, I guess, depending upon what the trash is. I don't know that I'd want any type of food or anything like that to sit around for only 6-time-a-year collections. So, you know, I mean, if it's grass clippings, it's one thing, but depending upon what else it might be, I think it could present a little bit of a problem. With respect to paying more, I mean, they've got to pay for a second barrel. Now there's a chance they might pay to bring an overflow. I feel more comfortable to have that stricken. I don't know what my colleagues want, but that would be my recommendation, Mr. Chairman.
I'll ask the rest of the members. I wouldn't have a problem with it either, especially since it's not, there isn't a fee being currently implemented, with the exception of items like TVs or cans of paint. Those are going to be an additional fee because those are sometimes hazardous materials, and we have to pay to dispose of those. I'll ask some of my other colleagues, and I'll come back to you, Councilor Zambudo, but Councilor Guanasso.
I have a couple of questions, namely regarding a tutorial for people to use a bin to dispose of their trash. You pick up the lid, you put the trash in, there's your tutorial. How much do you need to know? And what country don't you know? You pick it up, you throw it in. That's just a brief observation. My other observation is that the bin is pretty big. And I use like less than a half of the barrel, and we cook at home, and there's 2 of us. Leads me to believe that maybe in these single-family homes, there are a lot more people than we had imagined before. And so what these additional peoples, there could be a cause for concern as to how many people are living in that household, because that's a tremendous big barrel. And I don't have any problem with it.
In considering the barrel program and the use of a singular city-issued barrel, your concerns are among the considerations that were behind all that. In addition to that, and this is probably parallel to your concern, those who take their trash from other communities where there may be a fee attached to it, and brought their trash to be deposited in Revere. So it is surprising sometimes to drive by a single-family house and see an enormous amount of trash.
There's no need for a lot of what I see, and I see it quite often because I'm around the city all day long.
Well,
it strikes a big red flag to me.
What the ISD inspectors, I think, would tell us, and I think we're probably seeing some of this, people who are traveling from other communities see a barrel and they drop it. We know that it happens down at the boulevard with DCR barrels. One of the reasons for the city-issued barrel is that it does, in promoting this type of program, the Department of Environmental Protection is advocating not only for rodent control and things of that nature, but to encourage conservation so that people are not putting out as much trash, or they are very conscious of what they're putting out.
Just a footnote.
DEP was, one of the things they didn't like about this ordinance was the overflow trash collections. Their feeling is you should just only use so much.
In speaking with the elections department last week, she told me something to the fact that there might be 65,000 people residing in our community. That's a lot of people. And I don't know how many to a household, but that's a lot of people. And not to further it anymore, in terms of the request made by Councilor Rizzo, I think that's a very valid reason. You strike that fee. Why charge people if they have excess? And I think it should be done more frequently. You know, if people are going to be that conscious about going down and taking their excess trash to the dump, to the DPW, why charge them? I think it's, you know, they're doing a good thing for our neighborhoods. So I don't think that fee, I think he's right. We should strike that.
Thank you. Councilor McKenna, we'll come back to you, Tony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mara, when the trash bins came out, I suggested eight suggestions on how to educate people in the city to dispose of their trash correctly. Maybe we should take a look at that. That was about 3 or 4 months ago, but some of it was good. And maybe we should take a look at it as a city and maybe implement some of them. The other thing I want to say is that I like the barrels. I know that when people put their trash out, especially the rodent, even the rodent bags, rodents would get at it, tear it up, and there'd be litter all over the place. I feel like it has cut down on the litter in Revere. So I really do like the blue barrels, but I do think that Councilor Zambuto's right. We do need to educate, and instead of, just letting it, just passing them out and let them go on the wayside. So I agree. Thank you.
That is one of the most important parts of this ordinance, is that plastic bags used for trash are, that you can put on the sidewalk, mint flavored or whatever they are, that's no longer permitted, because it was a good idea when it came about, but over time, I think the rodents got used to the mint, developed a taste for it, so.
I would agree. Councilor Zambuto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to beat a dead horse here. I agree with some of this stuff, and I disagree with some of it. What I would like to see is I would like to see a second trash barrel at cost, at our cost. If we're gonna give second try, I made that recommendation a long time ago, and I think that that's a fair way of doing it.
Mr. Argento, you can speak to that, but I believe that they are available right now for
Great.
$75,
At cost, at
which
our
is
cost.
very reasonable. But
Yeah.
Mr. Argento.
Yes,
Mr.
Councilor
Durant.
Zambuto, we had tossed around the idea of the fee for the second barrel, and $75 is essentially at cost to the city.
Okay.
And to get to Councilor Rizzo's concern, cutting that piece out of the ordinance and seeing what happens, you could do that. You could always amend the ordinance. We do charge for everything that does come down to the city yard presently, and mattresses, bulk items, paint and everything, tires and what have you. So there are fees for everything that comes down there now. If someone brings down a bag of trash and it doesn't get out of hand.
My fear is that we're going to promote, somebody, I don't want to say scamming the system, but somebody circumventing the system by bringing trash that, if it's a homeowner's trash and they've got a little trash to bring down to the city yard, I'm fine with that, but it's ripe with fraud. I mean, let's face it, if a contractor or somebody else who may live in the city even decides to start bringing trash on a regular basis,
Right.
now we're creating a problem. So, listen, I'm not looking to hurt the family, the one-family homeowner and the person who's happens to have a little extra trash one week or whatever, but I don't want to incentivize extra trash coming to
Right.
the
And Council,
DPW.
we run into that now, and we're aware of it. I mean, you can come down the city yard with a mattress. There's people that pull in with 12,
Yeah.
16, and we just give them the boot. I mean,
Yeah. Well, that's my biggest
and
fear.
we'll do the same thing if someone's coming down with
Yeah.
pickup trucks full of trash. Obviously, we'll tell them to turn around and get out. But I mean, if a homeowner is coming down with an extra bag of
Yeah,
trash and you want to amend
I think
the
there's-
ordinance to that
I
point,
think
that's fine.
I think there's a compromise here, and without being,
Okay.
exposing this to.
Okay, and just, if I can make one more
Great.
comment, Patrick. Arthur Guanassa, the president, I'm going to be speaking for about 10 or 15 minutes during the council. We have a $40,000 DEP grant for education, mainly targeted at the recycling. So I want to let the council know what's going to be happening with that grant and how it's going to impact the residents. So I'll be speaking for like 10 minutes when the council meeting starts.
Well, that's excellent
Thank
news to hear of the DEP grant. Just a couple highlights on this. It looks like everyone seems to be pretty much in favor. What I would recommend is that we strike Section 8 BII, and if the DPW sees this becoming abused, then they can come back to us or communicate with us, and we would maybe potentially add that even with the fee. But I think for now we can pull that, and everyone on the council would agree. A couple of the other highlights that we would ask, we had mentioned Mr. Mara. Councilor Guanasso has volunteered to act for the video of placing the trash in the bin. and we would ask that there's lots of enforcement that comes along with this. I think that the ordinance in itself is much needed, especially where I do, and I agree, a lot of the neighbors that I have, originally some were a little not understanding of the new barrels, but you see the uniformity now. Everyone is actually really happy with them because they're seeing the program work, they're seeing some of the fruits of that labor, and it has provided uniformity. Even myself, I had 2 brand-new barrels. I put them in my backyard, and they have become yard waste barrels. But outside of that, I would vote to, I would ask that we
Mr. President, if
vote on
I could
this.
just
Yes?
interrupt for a second. There are 2 minor items. One sort of addresses the concerns raised by Councilor Rizzo with respect to people's use of the barrels that they already own. And those can also be used not only for the overflow trash, but they can be used for as a second recycling bin. And the ordinance requires that you simply write recycle, recyclables or recycle on the side. And we actually got a call from a resident the other day who asked whether he could use his additional barrels for yard waste, and recommended, and I'd recommend that this be included in the ordinance in section, on page 11, section 8.06.060E, with regard to yard waste and the disposal of it, that we similarly require that people write yard waste on those barrels, and so that if they do have barrels that they would not be able to use for trash collection, those barrels don't need to go to waste. They can be used for yard waste if it's marked so, or recyclables. So there may be some degree of hardship for some people, but for the most part, it's intended to address the much larger problem.
With that, the members, would you like to vote on this? We would amend that section, striking section 8B2.
So on the new trash collection ordinance as amended, Councilor Novoselsky is absent, Councilor Powers is absent, Councilor Rizzo?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Zambudo?
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Guanasso?
Yes.
Yes, and Chairman Keefe?
Yes.
Yes, the ordinance will be forwarded to the full city council as amended.
With that, it concludes our meeting of the Legislative Affairs Subcommittee. Have a great night. Thank you.